been cold over the last few weeks, but it's sunny today, so I thought I'd come out into the greenhouse and share with you some seeds that you can sow in February to have a really good harvest later this year. Before I make a start on February, I'll put a card up on the corner of the screen so that you can look at some of the seeds that I sowed back in January. Now they can still be sown now, so pop over to that video once you've watched this one. I've also got another card that will be coming up shortly, which is seeds that I suggested last year. So again, have a look at those once you've watched this video. It's still cold this time of year, so it's really important that you still consider how you're going to be protecting your seeds and aiding them to germinate and looking after them once they're seedlings. I'm lucky enough that I have a greenhouse here and I have some bits and pieces of equipment that aid me in that, such as the heated propagation bench and some of these heated propagators. Now these things can cost money, but you can use a windowsill in your house to try and achieve the same. So it doesn't have to mean that you go out and spend lots of money on this equipment. This video covers what you can sow in February, but it is very specific to my area. If you are more north than I am, so I'm in east of England in the UK, you probably need to be doing some of this a little bit later in the year. And if you're more southern, you might get away with doing some of this much earlier. So do think about the guidance that you're given, but also your own local situation. The first seed I'm going to be sowing in February is Marigold. Marigold is a flower that is edible in its own right, but it's also a wonderful decoy plant to put into your veg patch. Some of the best harvests of lettuce has been when I've been using Marigold as a decoy plant. So this year I'm going to be sowing a lot of them. These are ones that I collected last year. I know they will germinate because they were germinating where they fell in my veg patch. So I'll be getting on with sowing these now. Before I start sowing some seeds, I'm going to produce my own seed compost, and that's because the compost I have been using is just normal peat-free general compost, and that can retain quite a bit of moisture. It's not fine enough to allow there to be a decent amount of drainage. And the problem with retaining moisture around seeds is that it can rot, so I want to make sure that it retains enough moisture, but not so much it causes rotting. So to do that, I'm going to sieve out the compost using this sieve into this container, which I can lock up and hopefully retain some of the moisture in it, and be using vermiculite and peat-free compost to make this. Sowing marigolds into this tray, and once they are big enough I'll transplant them into their own pots. These were ones that I purchased and they went to seed, and I'm just going to sprinkle them across the top, and I'll give them a light covering of the potting mixture that I've just made, pop them onto the heated bed, and hopefully I should see some germination in the next week or so. As always, remember to label so you know what you've sown, and also put the date on it, and that way you can check to see how long it's taking for things to germinate and whether or not it's worth giving up on them and giving it another go. It's been around about a week since the beginning of this video, and I just wanted to show you just how well those marigolds are doing. I was really quite surprised at how quickly they've actually managed to sprout. So yeah, really pleased with that. They're coming on nicely. Quite a few more to come up, but it's a really good start. The next seed I'm going to suggest you sow this time of the year is tomato seeds. They, like aubergine, need a long season to get from seed all the way through to fruit, so getting them in this time of the year is brilliant. But as always, if you're going to sow now, you do need to think about giving them a little bit of extra warmth and protecting them from frost. This year I'm going for 4 different varieties of tomatoes. The first one is Sweet Million. It's an F1 and it's a cherry tomato. So these are really, really good for your salad. So I tend to grow these and pick them as they go ripe and use them straight away. The next one is a beefsteak, and this is delicious, and I'm looking forward to these. I've not really had much success with beefsteak, but they should go really nicely with some burgers. The next is another cherry tomato, but this time a yellow variety. My daughter really, really likes these, so I like to try and grow things that she likes to eat from the garden, and this is definitely one that did well last year. And this is Sun Gold F1. And finally, I've got Moneymaker, the classic and really good producing tomato. Now, if you're starting out doing tomatoes, this is definitely one that I'd recommend starting with. And I've always found tomatoes are a really, really good starter plant for anyone who's starting out growing their own food. It's very satisfying. They germinate well, they grow strong, and you tend to get some really, really good outcomes from them. I'm sowing 4 varieties of tomatoes this year, and they all get sown in the same way, so I'll just show you that once. But interestingly, like I said earlier on, the Moneymaker is a really, really good one to start with. You get 75 seeds, not that I need that many, in a pack, compared to 10 or 12 in all of the other varieties. So in terms of, bang for your buck, this is definitely one to get. I'm going to start off my tomato sowing with the beefsteak. Now, like I said earlier on, this is one that I'm pretty excited about. I do like these on burgers. So, as with all seeds, we're going to sow them into the potting mix that we produced earlier in the video. And I'm going to pre-water that before I put the seeds in. With this mix, I've added in some vermiculite, and that helps retain moisture, but it also helps with drainage. And one thing we don't want is that to be completely soaked so that it rots the actual seed as it's starting to germinate. Just going for a light covering of compost over the top. Now, I'm unlikely to need 15 tomato beefsteak plants, so I may thin them out depending on how they look, or once they grow up, give them away or find another home for them. Just finish up with another water. Onions are a really good starter crop for anyone who's starting off an allotment or starting to grow from home. They are relatively easy to germinate, and they produce well, and they store even better. So if you're thinking about trying to be a little bit self-sustaining on your food, these are definitely something to give a go. Like the golden variety of onions I sowed last month, I'm going to be multi-sowing these as well. That way I can get as many bulbs as I possibly can into a smaller space. It does mean you get smaller bulbs, but that should be all right. So I'm going to sow around about 5 or 6 seeds for each station. That way I should get a decent crop coming up in each. So again, just a quick covering over top. Give them a water. This time of year you can also start to sow some salad leaves, and I'm going to start off with some little gems. They take around 10 to 12 weeks to get to maturity for when you can eat them. They're not a cut and grow again variety, so getting them in early means that you get a really nice crop, hopefully in a couple of months' time. These ones at this time of year need to be under glass, so in a greenhouse or in a propagator, and then you need to protect them from frost as they start to grow. But hopefully as the last frost has passed, you can get them out into your plot and they'll grow on really strong. For a little bit of variety on the lettuce and salad front, I'm just going to be sowing some salad bowl red variety here. This can be done from February all the way through till July. Again, you need to be sowing these under cover this time of the year. This is a cut and grow again variety, so these are really good if you've got a small amount of space and you want to get a constant supply of lettuce. So I'm going to be putting these in as well. For the red salad bowl, I'm going to sow multiple seeds into the potting mix I made earlier. I'm just going to make sure it's nice and damp before I sow into them, just to give it a good chance for germination. One of the things that seeds really do need is moist soil. You don't want it to be waterlogged, but it does need to have plenty of moisture in it. One of the reasons I tend to multi-sow these days is because I found seed germination was a little bit inconsistent, and particularly as I tend to try and use up old packets of seeds. So multi-sowing just gives you a much better chance of getting plants into each of the seed stations or in the tray. These are pretty small seeds, so they're not going to need to have a huge covering of compost on them once they've been sown. But all I'm going to do is just put a few seeds into each station, and as they germinate, I'll start to separate them out and transplant them. Just a light dusting of compost over the top. So as always, make sure you label what you've just sown. It's very easy to think, I'll remember what's in there, but trust me, after a week or so, you'll forget and have to wait until something's germinated to remember what it was. Just put on what the seed is, the variety and the date. The date's really important because that'll let you know how long ago it was you sowed it, so you can think, is this actually germinating? Do I need to restart? Well, that's it for this video, and I hope it's been helpful, particularly if you're new to growing your own food. I'm looking forward to moving into spring. I can't wait for it to get here. And in the meantime, I'm starting to see some life coming back into the garden. We've got bulbs starting to come up in the flower beds, and I'm really looking forward to seeing those daffodils again this year. There is a little bit of a desire to go out and start clearing up some of the leaves that have fallen, but I'm going to keep them where they are at the moment because those will be homes to insects that will be beneficial to my garden later in the year. So I'm putting off clearing up for as long as I possibly can. As always, please like and subscribe. It really does help the channel out, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.